The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years. In that time, they had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched species evolve and sometimes go extinct. They had cataloged over 4 million intelligent species across the known universe, but they had never seen anything quite like the creatures that came from the small blue planet called Earth. Commander Vextel of the Galactic Survey Corps stood on the bridge of his ship, the Eternal Wanderer, and stared at the distress signal on his screen. The signal came from a human colony ship called the Horizon's Dream. It had crashed on a frozen moon in an uncharted system 3 standard cycles ago. "How many survivors?" Vextel asked his science officer, a tall being with purple skin and 4 eyes named Kurevan. "Unknown, Commander. The signal is weak. The ship's main power is failing. Life support systems are at critical levels." Kurevan's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of worry among her species. Vextel made a clicking sound with his mandibles. His species, the Torgan, were known for their logical thinking and careful planning. They did not rush into dangerous situations, but they also had honor codes that demanded they help those in need. "Set course for the moon, maximum speed." The Eternal Wanderer was one of the fastest ships in the Survey Corps. It would still take 2 days to reach the crashed colony ship. Vextel hoped the humans could survive that long. He knew little about humans. They were new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. They were considered primitive by most standards. Their technology was basic. Their bodies were fragile. They could not survive in extreme temperatures like the Torgan. They could not breathe underwater like the Velnari. They could not regenerate lost limbs like the Crixtal. But humans had something that made other species uncomfortable. They had a strange ability to bond with other creatures. They did not simply use animals for food or labor. They kept them as companions. They loved them. They treated them like family members. Vextel had read reports about these companion animals. The most common ones were called dogs. They were 4-legged creatures covered in fur. They had been bred by humans for thousands of years to serve different purposes. Some helped with hunting. Some protected homes. Some simply provided companionship. The Galactic Council found this practice strange. Most intelligent species had long ago separated themselves from the lesser creatures on their worlds. They used robots and AI for tasks that animals once performed. The idea of keeping an animal in your home, sleeping beside it, sharing food with it, seemed primitive and dirty. Vextel did not understand it either, but he also did not understand many things about humans. He had learned not to judge species too quickly. The universe was vast and full of different ways of living. The 2 days of travel passed slowly. Vextel spent most of his time reviewing everything they knew about the Horizon's Dream. The ship had been carrying 500 colonists to a new world. They had families aboard, children, and according to the manifest, over 100 companion animals. Most of these animals were dogs of various breeds. The manifest listed golden retrievers, German shepherds, Labrador retrievers, beagles, and many other types. Each one was registered to a specific family. Each one was listed by name. Vextel found this interesting. Naming an animal suggested a level of connection that went beyond simple ownership. You did not name a tool. You named something you cared about. His second officer, a gruff Torgan named Brelvac, was less impressed. "Humans waste resources on useless creatures," he said. "These animals serve no practical purpose on a colony ship. They consume food. They take up space. They are inefficient." "Perhaps," Vextel replied. "But humans have survived and thrived despite their supposed inefficiency. Perhaps there is something we do not understand." Brelvac made a sound of dismissal, but said nothing more. "Commander, we are approaching the moon," Kurevan announced. Vextel looked at the view screen. The moon was a ball of ice and rock. Temperatures on the surface were well below freezing. The atmosphere was thin and toxic. No native life could survive there. The conditions were hostile to almost every known species. Scan for the crashed ship. The sensors swept across the frozen landscape. After a moment, they found it. The Horizon's Dream lay on its side in a valley between two ice mountains. The ship was broken in half. Smoke rose from several sections, quickly turning to ice in the cold air. The damage was severe. It was remarkable that anyone had survived the initial crash. Life signs? Vextel asked, though he feared the answer. Kerevan was quiet for a long moment as she studied her instruments. Then her 4 eyes widened. Commander, I am detecting life signs. Many of them. They are clustered in the front section of the ship. How many? 342 humanoid signatures, and something else. 73 additional life forms. They match the biological profile of Earth canines. Vextel felt relief wash through him. Survivors. Many more than he had expected given the damage to the ship. But how had they survived for 3 days in these conditions with broken life support systems? Prepare landing teams, full environmental suits, medical supplies, heating equipment. He paused, thinking about the animals. And prepare for the dogs as well. We will rescue all survivors. Some of his crew exchanged uncertain looks. The Torgan did not have companion animals. They found the practice unsettling. But orders were orders, and the commander's word was law on the ship. The landing teams descended to the frozen moon in heavily armored shuttles. The cold was brutal, even through their environmental suits. The wind cut through every gap in their equipment. Visibility was poor due to the constant snow that fell from the gray sky. Vextel insisted on leading the first team himself. He wanted to see the situation with his own eyes. When they reached the crashed ship, Vextel was surprised to find survivors waiting for them at the entrance. A human male with a thick beard and tired eyes stood at the front. He wore multiple layers of clothing and held a heating rod in one hand. Behind him, Vextel could see other humans huddled together in the dim interior. "You came," the human said, his voice rough with emotion. "We didn't know if anyone would find us. We didn't know if our distress signal was even working." "I am Commander Vextel of the Galactic Survey Corps. We received your distress signal. We are here to help." The human nodded. His eyes were wet with tears that threatened to freeze on his face. "I'm Captain Marcus Webb. There are 340 survivors inside. We have wounded. We have children. We have elderly. We have—" He paused, looking back into the ship. "We have dogs." Vextel noticed the way the human said that last word. Like it was important. Like the dogs mattered as much as the human survivors. Like leaving them behind was not an option he would consider. "We will rescue everyone," Vextel said. "Lead us inside." Captain Webb turned and led them into the broken ship. The interior was dark and cold, but not as cold as outside. Vextel's sensors showed the temperature was just above freezing, cold enough to be dangerous for humans, but survivable for a limited time. As they moved deeper into the ship, Vextel began to understand how the humans had survived. They had sealed off the damaged sections with emergency barriers. They had gathered every heating device they could find and placed them strategically. They had shared body heat by staying close together in the most insulated area of the ship. And then he saw the dogs. They were everywhere, big ones and small ones with long fur and ones with short fur, ones with floppy ears and ones with pointed ears. They lay beside human children, keeping them warm with their bodies. They stood guard at doorways, alert for any danger despite their own exhaustion. They moved among the survivors, checking on each person, offering comfort with wet noses and wagging tails. Vextel stopped walking. He stared at the scene before him with all 6 of his eyes. A young human girl, no more than 5 years old, sat wrapped in blankets in the corner. A large golden dog lay curled around her, its body heat keeping her alive. The dog's fur was thick and warm. The girl's small fingers were buried in it. She was sleeping peacefully, her breath making small clouds in the cold air. The dog raised its head when Vextal approached, watching him carefully, but did not move from its protective position. "The dog saved us," Captain Webb said quietly. He stood beside Vextal, watching the same scene. "When the heating systems failed after the crash, we thought we would freeze. The temperature dropped so fast. The children were crying. The elderly were shivering. We had maybe hours before hypothermia would start killing people." He swallowed hard. His voice shook with remembered fear and present gratitude. "But the dogs," he shook his head in wonder. "They gathered around the children first, then the elderly, then the sick. They shared their body heat. They pressed against the people who needed warmth the most. They kept us alive." Vextal did not speak. He could not speak. In his 200 years of service to the Survey Corps, he had never seen anything like this. He had seen species sacrifice themselves for their own kind. He had seen acts of bravery and heroism between beings of the same blood. But he had never seen a lesser creature willingly give its warmth, risk its own life, to save beings of another species. These dogs did not have to help the humans. They could have gathered together to keep themselves warm. They could have fought for resources, for the warmest spots near the heating rods. They could have looked after only themselves. Instead, they had protected the weak. They had comforted the scared. They had acted with more honor than many intelligent species Vextal had encountered in his long career. "Commander," Curavan said softly beside him. She had been scanning the room with her instruments. "These creatures, they are remarkable. Their body temperatures are elevated. They are producing extra heat. It is as if they know they are needed." "Yes," Vextal agreed, "they are." He looked around the room again, seeing it with new eyes. He saw a large German shepherd lying between two elderly humans, warming them both. He saw a small beagle pressed against a sick child, its head resting on the child's chest. He saw a black Labrador retriever standing at the entrance to the sealed section, watching the door, ready to warn of any danger. These animals were not tools, they were not servants. They were guardians, protectors, family. Vextal made a decision in that moment. He did not know where it would lead, but he knew it was right. "Begin the rescue operation immediately," he ordered. "All survivors are to be treated equally, humans and dogs alike. No one gets left behind." The rescue operation was complex and difficult. Teams moved through the ship, carefully transporting survivors to the warmth of the Eternal Wanderer. Medical officers treated the wounded, human and canine alike. Food and water were distributed to everyone who needed it. And through it all, the dogs stayed with their humans. They walked beside them, close enough to touch. They refused to be separated. When one medical officer tried to move a dog away from a human patient to examine him, the animal simply sat down and would not move. It looked at the officer with dark eyes full of determination, as if to say, "I am not leaving." The officer looked to Vextal for guidance. "Let them stay together," the commander ordered. "Do not separate the animals from their humans." It was the first of many such orders he would give, and it would change everything the galaxy thought they knew about companion species. The Eternal Wanderer was not designed to carry passengers. It was a survey vessel meant for exploration and research. The crew quarters were minimal. The common areas were functional but small. The ship had never been intended to house over 300 humans and 70 dogs. But Vextal made room. He converted cargo bays into living quarters. He rationed supplies to feed everyone. He assigned crew members to assist with the care of survivors. He did whatever was necessary to keep everyone safe and comfortable. The journey back to the nearest space station would take 10 days. 10 days of close quarters with humans and their dogs. 10 days that would change how Vextal understood the universe. He spent much of that time observing the animals. He was fascinated by them in a way he had never been fascinated by any other creature. He could not stop watching how they interacted with the humans. A small white dog followed a human boy everywhere. When the boy sat down, the dog sat beside him. When the boy was sad, the dog licked his face until he smiled. When the boy laughed, the dog's tail wagged so hard its whole body shook. The joy between them was pure and simple and beautiful. An old gray dog stayed close to an elderly human woman. It helped her walk when she was tired, pressing against her legs to offer support. It rested its head on her lap when she sat, offering silent comfort. It seemed to understand her in ways that went beyond words, responding to her moods, her needs, her unspoken fears. A large black dog with pointed ears stood guard over a group of human children who played together in one of the cargo bays. It watched every doorway, every shadow, every movement. It never rested. It never relaxed. It was ready to protect those children from any threat, real or imagined. The children played without fear because the dog was there. Vextel began to understand why humans kept these creatures. They were not pets in the way his species understood the concept. They were partners, friends, family members who happened to walk on four legs. He asked Captain Webb about it one evening. They sat together in the observation deck, watching the stars streak past as the ship traveled through faster-than-light space. "How do you explain the bond between humans and dogs?" Vextel asked. "I have studied many species. I have observed many relationships, but I have never seen anything quite like this." Marcus Webb smiled. It was the first genuine smile Vextel had seen from the man since the rescue. Despite the trauma of the crash, despite the fear of those 3 days on the frozen moon, the human smiled when talking about dogs. "Dogs have been with us for 30,000 years, Webb said. Maybe longer. We evolved together, we grew together. In the beginning it was probably practical. They helped us hunt. They protected our camps from predators. They warned us of danger. We gave them food and shelter. It was a partnership based on survival." He leaned back, looking out at the stars. "But over time it became about more than survival. We loved them. And somehow, against all logic, they loved us back. Not because we fed them. Not because we gave them shelter. They loved us because we were pack, because we were family, because that is what dogs do." "Love," Vextel repeated the word. His species did not have an exact equivalent. They had concepts of duty, of respect, of obligation. But the pure emotional bond the human described was foreign to his experience. "It is hard to explain to someone who has not felt it," Webb admitted. "Love is caring about another being more than you care about yourself, wanting them to be happy, being willing to sacrifice for them without expecting anything in return." He looked at a dog sleeping nearby, a brown and white creature curled up against a human child. Dogs understand love better than most humans do. They give it freely. They give it without conditions. They do not ask for anything in return, except the chance to be near you. Vextel considered this. His species valued logic and efficiency. They formed partnerships based on mutual benefit. They calculated the cost and reward of every relationship. The idea of loving something simply because you chose to, without expecting anything in return, was strange to him. But he was beginning to understand why it might be valuable. Over the next few days, Vextel noticed changes in his crew. The Torgan officers, who had been uncomfortable around the dogs at first, began to warm to them. They started asking questions about the animals. They watched how the dogs behaved. They observed the bonds between dogs and humans. One young officer named Trelvek spent hours sitting with a medium-sized brown dog. The dog was calm and patient. It let Trelvek touch its fur, examine its paws, look at its teeth. It seemed to understand that the alien was curious, and it did not mind being studied. It wagged its tail whenever Trelvek approached, as if happy to see him. "Commander," Trelvek reported one day, "these animals have a remarkable ability to sense emotional states. They know when someone is sad or scared or happy. They respond appropriately to each situation. It is not simply training. It is something deeper." "You have learned this from observation." And from experience, Trelvek made a soft clicking sound that indicated embarrassment among Torgen. I was feeling homesick last night. I was sitting alone in the observation deck, thinking about my family on our home world. The brown dog found me. I do not know how it knew I was there or how it knew I was sad, but it came and sat beside me. It placed its head on my leg, and I felt better. I do not understand why, but I did. Vextel nodded slowly. He had felt it too. The dogs had a calming presence that went beyond their physical warmth. They made the ship feel less empty, less cold. They brought comfort that had nothing to do with temperature. Caravan had similar observations from her scientific studies. The dogs show remarkable emotional intelligence, she told Vextel in her report. They seem to read body language and facial expressions. They pick up on subtle cues that even intelligent species might miss. They adjust their behavior based on the emotional needs of those around them. This level of empathy is rare, Commander, even among species we consider highly intelligent. Even Brelvac, who had dismissed dogs as useless creatures, began to change his mind. Vextel caught him one evening sitting in the cargo bay, a large German shepherd lying at his feet. Brelvac was scratching behind the dog's ears, a look of peace on his usually stern face. He did not mention it to the second officer. Some things were better left unspoken. By the time they reached the space station, something had changed aboard the Eternal Wanderer. The survivors were ready to begin new lives. The crew was ready to return to their duties, but neither group wanted to forget what they had experienced together. Before the survivors disembarked, Captain Webb approached Commander Vextel one final time. They stood in the main airlock, watching as humans and dogs prepared to leave the ship that had saved them. "I want to thank you," Webb said. "Not just for the rescue. Any ship might have picked up our distress signal and come to help, but you did more than save our lives. You treated our dogs as worthy of rescue. You kept us together. You understood that they are part of our families." Vextel inclined his head. "I did not understand at first. I confess that I found your attachment to these animals strange, even primitive, but I believe I understand now. These creatures are special. They possess qualities that many intelligent species lack." Webb nodded. "They are the best of us. Everything good about humans dogs have: loyalty, love, courage, compassion, the willingness to help others without asking why or expecting reward." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "Maybe that is what makes them so important. They remind us of who we want to be." The survivors left the ship. The dogs went with them, walking proudly beside their humans, tails wagging, ears alert. Vextel watched them go. He stood there for a long time after they had disappeared into the station, thinking about what he had witnessed, thinking about what it meant for the galaxy, thinking about a report he needed to write. A report that would change everything. The Galactic Council received Commander Vextel's report 3 days later. It was unlike any report they had ever read from a Survey Corps mission. It did not focus on the technical aspects of the rescue. It did not discuss the ship damage or the survival tactics used by the humans. Instead, it focused almost entirely on the dogs. Vextel described how the animals had kept the humans warm during those desperate 3 days. He documented the bonds between the dogs and their humans. He explained the concept of emotional support and how these creatures provided it without being asked, without expecting reward, without any apparent self-interest. He included data from Caravan's scientific observations. He quoted the testimonials of his crew members, including Trelvac's experience with the brown dog. He even included Brelvac's grudging admission that dogs were not entirely without merit. Most importantly, he recommended that the Galactic Council study Earth dogs. He suggested that other species might benefit from having such companions. The report caused an uproar. Many council members found the idea offensive. The Velnari ambassador called it a step backward in evolution and suggested that Vextel had been compromised by too much time spent with primitive humans. The crystal representative said it was undignified for intelligent beings to rely on lesser creatures for emotional support. But some council members were curious. They asked questions. They requested more information. They wanted to know more about these dogs and the bonds they formed with humans. The debate lasted for weeks. It became the most discussed topic in the Galactic Council. Videos from the rescue were shared across the galaxy. Images of dogs keeping children warm went viral on the Galactic Network. Stories spread about the courage and loyalty of these Earth creatures. Public opinion began to shift before the Council did. Ordinary citizens across hundreds of worlds watched the videos and were moved by what they saw. They sent messages to their council representatives, asking for more information about dogs, asking if they could have such companions themselves. Slowly, the council began to respond. A delegation from the Morven species requested permission to visit Earth and observe dogs in their natural environment. The Morven were known for their emotional sensitivity. They experienced feelings more deeply than most species. They struggled with loneliness and depression more than others. They wanted to know if dogs could help them the way dogs helped humans. The humans agreed to the visit. They were proud of their dogs and happy to share them with the galaxy. The Morven delegation spent 3 months on Earth. They visited homes where dogs lived as beloved family members. They observed shelters where abandoned dogs waited for new families. They studied training facilities where dogs learned to serve specific purposes. They saw service dogs helping disabled humans navigate the world. They saw therapy dogs bringing comfort to sick children in hospitals. They saw search and rescue dogs saving lives in disaster zones. They saw police dogs protecting communities. They saw guide dogs leading the blind with patient devotion. They saw love. They saw loyalty. They saw something they had never encountered in all their travels through the galaxy. When they returned to the council, they brought a different message than anyone expected. These creatures, the Morven ambassador said, standing before the full assembly of the Galactic Council, are not lesser beings. They are different beings. They have evolved alongside humans for tens of thousands of years to become something unique in all the galaxy, something valuable, something we should all learn from. The ambassador's speech was broadcast across thousands of worlds. Billions of beings watched as they spoke about Earth dogs with passion and conviction. We have spent so long trying to separate ourselves from other creatures, the ambassador continued. We have built walls between ourselves and the natural worlds we came from. We have replaced biological connection with technological efficiency. We have forgotten how to bond with other living beings. We have lost something important. The ambassador paused. When they spoke again, their voice was thick with emotion. The humans never forgot. They kept their bonds with dogs through all the changes of their civilization. They nurtured those relationships across thousands of years. They created something beautiful, and in return, the dogs gave them unconditional love, unwavering loyalty, and a connection to something beyond themselves. The speech ended with a formal recommendation that the Galactic Council recognize dogs as beneficial companion species, and that they be made available to any species that wish to adopt them. The vote was close. Many species still objected to the idea. They clung to their beliefs about the superiority of intelligent life, the dignity of technological civilization, the inappropriateness of emotional bonds with animals. But enough council members had been moved by the evidence. Enough had watched the videos and read the reports and heard the testimonials. Enough had begun to wonder if maybe, just maybe, these primitive humans had discovered something valuable. The measure passed. Dogs became the first species from any world to be recognized as galactic standard for companion animals. The decision sparked changes across the galaxy. Dog breeding programs were established on multiple worlds, carefully managed to ensure the health and well-being of the animals. Training facilities were open to help dogs adapt to new environments and new species. Cultural exchange programs brought dogs to beings who had never seen them before. But there were challenges too. Dogs were not suited for every environment. Some species lived in conditions too hot or too cold for dogs to survive comfortably. Others could not provide the diet that dogs needed, and some species simply did not connect with them the way humans did. The Galactic Council created guidelines for dog adoption. Species had to prove they could meet the animal's physical and emotional needs. They had to demonstrate that they understood dogs were not tools or servants, but companions who required love and care and respect. Not every species qualified. Some were disappointed. Others were angry. Some accused the Council of cultural imperialism, of forcing human values on the rest of the galaxy. But those who did qualify found their lives changed in ways they never expected. The Morven established the first non-human dog breeding program. Within 10 years, dogs had become common companions throughout their civilization. Depression rates among Morven dropped by 40%. Loneliness declined even more. The species that had struggled so long with emotional pain found comfort in the warm presence of loyal dogs. Other species followed. The Velnari, despite their initial opposition, became some of the most devoted dog owners in the galaxy. They bred water-adapted dogs who could swim alongside them in their underwater cities. The Crystal, with their ability to regenerate lost limbs, became excellent partners for service dogs, able to recover quickly from any accidental injury during training. Even the Torgan eventually embraced dogs, though they approached it with their typical logic and efficiency. They developed detailed protocols for dog care. They created scientific breeding programs to optimize health and temperament. They made dog ownership into a system. But the dogs did not care about systems. They cared about love, and they gave it to their Torgan partners just as freely as they gave it to humans. Logic and efficiency melted in the face of wagging tails and wet noses. Even the most rational Torgan found themselves talking to their dogs, sharing their thoughts, feeling comfort in a presence that asked nothing but offered everything. 10 years after the rescue mission, Commander Vextal retired from the Survey Corps. He had served with honor for over 2 centuries. He had explored more star systems than he could count. He had made first contact with dozens of new species. But his greatest achievement, the one people remembered him for, was his report about Earth dogs. On the day of his retirement, he received a gift from the Galactic Council. It was a symbol of their appreciation for his service and his contribution to galactic civilization. It was a dog. The animal was a medium-sized creature with brown and white fur. It had floppy ears and a tail that never stopped wagging. Its eyes were bright and intelligent, full of life and joy. Its name, according to the documents, was Max. Vextal had not expected this gift. He did not know what to do with it. His species did not traditionally keep companion animals. They had never understood the appeal. Max did not seem to care about any of that. The dog looked up at Vextal with eyes full of trust. Its tail wagged harder when their gazes met. It made a small sound of happiness, a soft whine of excitement. It stepped closer, pressing against Vextal's legs. Vextal felt something strange in his chest, something he had never felt before. It was warm and soft and frightening and wonderful all at once. "What do I do with you?" he asked the dog. Max answered by wagging his tail, even harder, and licking Vextal's hand. Over the following weeks, Vextal learned how to care for a dog. He learned about feeding schedules and exercise needs. He learned about grooming and health checks. He learned about toys and treats and the importance of praise and affection. But mostly, he learned about companionship. Max was always there. When Vextal woke up in the morning, the dog was beside his bed, tail already wagging. When he ate meals, the dog sat nearby, watching with hopeful eyes. When he worked on his memoirs, the dog lay at his feet, warm and solid and comforting. At first, Vextel found this constant presence annoying. He was used to solitude. He valued his privacy. He had spent 2 centuries alone on starships, comfortable with silence. Having another creature always nearby felt intrusive. But slowly his feelings changed. He began to look forward to coming home because Max would be there to greet him with enthusiasm that never faded. He started talking to the dog, telling it about his day, sharing his thoughts and memories. He realized that the dog listened, really listened. It might not understand the words, but it understood the feelings behind them. It responded to his tone, his mood, his unspoken emotions. One night, Vextel woke from a nightmare. It was an old memory, one that haunted him sometimes. A mission that had gone wrong long ago. Lives that had been lost under his command. Guilt that never quite faded despite the centuries. Max was there instantly. The dog had sensed his distress before he was fully awake. It jumped onto the bed and pressed close to him, its warm body a comfort in the darkness. It licked his face gently. It whined softly, as if asking what was wrong. Vextel wrapped his arms around the dog. He held it tight, feeling the steady beat of its heart against his chest. And for the first time in 200 years, he let himself cry. Max did not judge him, did not question him, did not offer advice or solutions. The dog simply stayed close, offering its presence, its warmth, its unconditional love. In that moment, Vextel finally understood what Captain Webb had tried to explain all those years ago on the frozen moon. Love was not logical. It was not efficient. It could not be measured or quantified or explained by science. But it was real. It was powerful. It was perhaps the most important thing in the universe. And dogs, these simple creatures from a small blue planet, understood it better than anyone. Vextel became an advocate for the Dog Companion program. He spoke at council meetings, sharing his experiences with species who were considering adoption. He gave interviews on the Galactic Network, explaining how dogs had changed his life. He wrote articles and gave lectures and traveled to worlds where beings were still skeptical of these Earth animals. "I was wrong," he told them. "I spent my entire life believing that intelligence was the highest measure of value, that logical thinking was superior to emotional connection, that efficiency was more important than love. I was wrong." He would look down at Max, who was always by his side now, and make the Torgan expression that served as a smile. "These dogs have taught me more about living than 2 centuries of exploration ever did. They have taught me that connection matters, that love matters, that sometimes the smallest, simplest creatures can be the wisest, that the measure of a life is not what you achieve, but who you love and who loves you in return." His message spread across the galaxy. More species began adopting dogs. The breeding programs expanded. Training facilities opened on hundreds of worlds. Dogs became ambassadors of a different way of living, a way that valued emotional connection over technological advancement, love over logic, companionship over efficiency. And the dogs, as they always had, adapted. They bonded with species that looked nothing like humans. They provided comfort to beings made of crystal and beings made of gas. They wagged their tails for creatures with 10 legs and creatures with none. They slept beside aliens of every shape and size, keeping them warm, keeping them safe, keeping them loved. Because dogs did not care what you looked like. They did not care where you came from. They did not care about your species or your culture or your level of technological development. They only cared about one thing: the bond, the connection, the love. 30 years after the rescue mission, dogs could be found on almost every inhabited world in the galaxy. They had become ambassadors of emotional connection in a universe that had forgotten how important it was. They had taught billions of beings what it meant to be loved unconditionally, to have a companion who would never judge you, never abandon you, never stop caring about you. And it all started with one crashed ship, one frozen moon, and a group of dogs who refused to let their humans freeze. The Grand Archive of the Galactic Council was the largest repository of knowledge in the known universe. It held records dating back millions of years. It documented the rise and fall of civilizations, the evolution of species, the great events that shaped galactic history. In a special section reserved for the most significant documents, there was a display dedicated to Earth dogs. The display included Commander Vextel's original report. It included videos from the rescue mission. It included testimonials from hundreds of species describing how dogs had changed their lives. It included scientific studies and cultural analyses and philosophical treatises on the nature of interspecies love. But the centerpiece of the display was a simple photograph. It showed a young human girl on a frozen moon. She was wrapped in blankets, her eyes closed in peaceful sleep. Around her, forming a protective circle, were 5 dogs. They had arranged themselves to provide maximum warmth to her small body. Their eyes were alert, watching for any threat despite their own exhaustion. Their bodies were pressed close together and to the girl, sharing every bit of heat they had. The photograph was titled, "The Rescue That Changed Everything." Below it was a plaque with words that had been adopted as the official statement of the Galactic Companion Species Council. In the coldness of space, warmth comes not from stars but from hearts. Earth dogs taught the galaxy this truth. They showed us that love requires no words, that loyalty needs no contract, that companionship is the greatest gift one being can offer another. They are, and will always be, the standard by which all companion species are measured. Every year on the anniversary of the rescue, beings from across the galaxy gathered at the archive. They came with their dogs. They came to remember. They came to celebrate the bond between species, the love that transcended form and biology and culture. The humans who attended always brought their dogs close, hugging them, thanking them, loving them openly. Other species did the same in their own ways. Torgan clicked their mandibles affectionately while scratching behind canine ears. Velnari wrapped their amphibious bodies around their water-adapted dogs. Morven wept openly while their dogs licked away their tears. It was a sight that would have seemed impossible 100 years earlier. Different species, different forms, different cultures, all united by their love for these simple creatures from Earth. The dogs, of course, did not understand the significance of the gathering. They did not know that they had changed galactic history. They did not know that they were considered the gold standard for companion animals throughout the known universe. They only knew that they were surrounded by beings who loved them, and that was enough. That was everything. Because that was what dogs had always known, from the first wolf that approached a human campfire 30,000 years ago. Love, in all its forms, was the only thing that truly mattered. As the anniversary celebration continued, an old Torgan made his way through the crowd. He moved slowly now, his years catching up with him at last, but his 6 eyes were still sharp, and his heart was still full. Beside him walked an old dog with graying fur. The dog's muzzle was white with age. Its steps were not as steady as they once were, but it still walked close to its companion, still matched its pace, still stayed by its side as it had for 15 years. Commander Vextel, retired for 30 years now, stopped in front of the display. He looked at the photograph of the sleeping girl and the protective dogs. He remembered the day he had taken that picture, standing in the cold of that frozen moon, not yet understanding what he was seeing. He understood now. Max pressed against his leg, offering warmth, offering comfort, offering love. The old dog was tired, its health failing, but it would not leave its companion's side. Not now, not ever. Vextel reached down and touched the old dog's head. His clawed hand, once so unfamiliar with gentle contact, now knew exactly how to stroke the soft fur, exactly where to scratch behind the ears, exactly how to express love through touch. "Thank you," he whispered to Max, to all dogs, to the universe that had brought them together. Thank you for teaching me how to love." Max's tail wagged slowly but steadily. The dog looked up at Vextel with eyes full of the same trust, the same devotion, the same unconditional love that it had shown on the first day they met. Some things never changed, some bonds never weakened, some love never faded. That was the gift that Earth dogs had given to the galaxy. Not just companionship, not just warmth, but the knowledge that love could exist between any beings, anywhere, anytime. That the walls between species were not as high as they seemed. That connection was possible across every divide. All you had to do was open your heart and let a dog walk into it. The celebration continued long into the night. Songs were sung in 100 languages. Stories were shared across species barriers. Dogs ran and played and rested and loved. Somewhere in the crowd, a young human child sat with a Torgan youngling, children of a mixed family, something that would have been unthinkable a century ago. Between them was a young dog, energetic and joyful, its tail wagging at impossible speeds as it tried to play with both children at once. The human child laughed. The Torgan youngling made clicking sounds of happiness. The dog barked once, twice, then rolled over for belly rubs from 4 small hands. This was the future. This was what the rescue had made possible, not just the survival of 300 humans, but the connection of an entire galaxy, the proof that love could cross any boundary, the demonstration that beings did not have to be the same to care for each other. All because of dogs. All because of love. All because on a frozen moon, in the darkest hour, a group of animals had chosen to share their warmth with beings who needed it most. The stars continued their endless dance overhead. Civilizations would rise and fall. Species would evolve and change. The galaxy would grow and shrink and transform in ways no one could predict. But one thing would remain constant across all the worlds of the Galactic Council. Dogs were there, dogs were loved, dogs were family. And that was never going to change.